Recording. And Randa, next slide, and it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Donna, and good evening and welcome AUW California. I am so excited to see you all here tonight. Some of you, excuse me, some of you I know have been attending school board meetings in your district ever since the school board project began 2 years ago. And some of you are new to the project. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. If you're new to our project, I want to encourage you to take a look at our website. It's the School Board Project. It's a project of the AUW California State Public Policy Committee. And we have our own web page, and I'm going to ask Randa to drop that into the chat for you. And if you are new to the project, please make sure you take a look, and it will give you all the information that you need to know what we've been doing for the last 2 years, and it will bring you up to date. And I want to thank all of you who participated in our most recent survey. This is our second survey. And I just want to make a note that in our first survey that we did 2 years ago when we started this project, we had about 73 of our branches. We had 73 members from 65 of our branches respond. The survey that we just did at the beginning of this year, we had 272 members responded from 97 different branches. Through that survey, we learned that 55 branches had at least one member who attended a board meeting in 2024, and 58 of you have vowed to attend in 2025. And I hope some of those 58 of you are out here in our audience tonight, because through this presentation, you're going to learn where we're going to go with our third phase of our project and how you fit in with that. Now, I know you're all here because you're as concerned as I am about the attacks on our public schools right now. It seems they're coming from all directions. At the national level, with the dismantling of the Department of Education and the intensified push for vouchers and charter schools. At the state level, with the introduction of 5 bills this session to undo all the progress we have made toward protecting our students' rights to learn, thrive, and feel safe in our schools. And at the local level, with the ongoing assault on our school boards by so-called parents' rights groups. Sometimes I know it can all feel overwhelming, but we AUW members are fierce guardians of education and of our most vulnerable young people, right? And we are not going to stand by and allow California students to be stripped of their right to learn or to read or to feel safe in their own bodies. And while it may be true that California has some of the most protective laws in the nation, it is equally true that those laws are being challenged every day by aggressive and regressive school board members who seem to be just itching to get a test case before the US Supreme Court. So this is a clarion call to all you warriors out there who are ready to stand and say, bring it on. And fortunately, we don't have to do it alone. We have found a wonderful partner in the Public School Defenders Hub, a fantastic organization that shares not just our concerns, but also our energy and drive to do something about it. Their mission is to, quote, proactively reduce the proliferation and detrimental impacts of anti-public education extremists, unquote. They provide research, data collection, and reports in a resource library open to all defenders of public education. More importantly, they provide trainings such as the one you will be receiving tonight for fellow warriors like us who want to make an impact in our local districts. The Public School Defenders Hub is a program of the Contemporary Policy Institute. I love this statement from their website. Quote, children learn in environments that make them feel safe, valued, engaged, challenged, healthy, and connected, unquote. We are so fortunate to have with us tonight a Policy Institute trainer who is going to give us the tools we need to help secure those environments in our local districts by holding our school board members' feet to the fire and making sure they are following California's protective laws. Brianna Mullen has worked as a state policymaker, community organizer, and educational advocate for the past 15 years to ensure the most vulnerable children have access to a liberatory education and healthy communities. Raised in the Bay Area, Brianna is a first-generation college student and has master's, not one, that's plural, master's degrees in policy, organization, and leadership studies at Stanford Graduate School of Education and in public policy from the Stanford School of Humanities and Sciences. She is a 2020 Knight Hennessy Scholar and was selected as the first Stanford Global Impact Award winner in 2023. She graduated from the University of California, Berkeley, and was a board member for the SAC Children's Commission, Torlakson Whole Child Institute, and Associated Students of the University of California. And here's a fun fact. Brianna was a tech trekker and later volunteered as a junior counselor and then as a dorm mom. And to top it all off, she was also a scholarship recipient. How cool is that? And now I give you the cool Miss Brianna Mullen.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That was probably my favorite introduction I've ever had. I am really, really excited to be here tonight with you all. Like Kathy said, AUW has been a part of my life for a very long time because of the scholarship that I received. I got to go to a college campus for the first time at Mills College and spend the weekend there and figure out what I wanted to do. Never would have thought that it would, bring me back here, but in some ways I think it's comes full circle. So I'm really excited to be here with a group of women who I know are so dedicated to public education as I am. I am Brianna Mullen, and I have the honor of being a program consultant with the Public School Defenders Hub to really try and bring the tools that you all need to stand up for your public schools in your neighborhoods, because we really need every person, every advocate, every believer in our communities to stand up today. So this is a really important and timely training. We're really hoping that our session leaves you feeling empowered at the end. We know that there are many hats and roles that you all play as community members, community leaders, parents, grandparents, advocates, and many of you may work with and around schools right now and know how important they are to protecting children and families during this really challenging time. So today we're going to walk through a couple different things. We're going to really try and empower you to monitor your school board meetings effectively, to know what to look out for, both in terms of how do you defend against attacks, but how do you also lift up the positive impacts that we know public schools do and share the stories that we need to about the miracles that public schools do every day for our kids. Really help you understand some of the key education code requirements that Kathy mentioned in the beginning. California has very strong state laws and that protect students based on all forms of identity and staff. And so we really want to make sure you understand what those California state laws are so that you can stand up for them when you see that they may not be enforced. And we also want to make sure that you really understand the key powers that school boards have, some of their limitations, and some next steps with the school board project on how to understand when to take the next step of documenting and filing violations that you do see. So we really want you to make sure you understand the most important laws, and we will share all of these slides afterwards with the specific ed code sections. So just feel free to listen tonight and come with your questions. We're going to stop about halfway through in about 20 minutes and do a little Q&A session, and then we'll dive back into a little bit more of the material where we can talk about some of the things that we know are coming up in school boards all across California. And then finally, we'll close with how do you know when and how to file a complaint, and different tools that have been made available thanks to a partnership with the Public School Defenders Hub and the Southern California ACLU. So First, we'll start by grounding ourselves and really understanding what are school boards. What are they supposed to do? And the first thing you have to understand is that school boards are independent bodies. They don't have to answer to city or county boards, except in specific cases, maybe sometimes like charter school petitions or finance issues. But largely, school boards get to operate fairly independently. They have elected representatives, but oftentimes, right now, we have a shortage of people running for office. So a lot of school board members can actually be appointed in between elections. So it's important to pay attention to who is on being appointed and running on those local boards. They have a lot of different responsibilities, but the number one responsibility that most people see is that they hire and fire the superintendent. They oversee local curriculum choices, and they ensure hopefully that students receive the materials they need in order to learn, and they do so by allocating the budget. And so school districts in California have wide budgetary authority under the local control funding formula, and that largely means that they're supposed to interact with community members every year between January and July. So right now is budget time. I'm sure many of you are participating maybe in conversations about schools' budgets. And so we know that there's all of these different roles that school districts have, and we're going to dive into some specific ones tonight, really around curriculum and how to monitor some of those budget allocations. We know that some school districts are struggling with, is this an appropriate use of funds or not? We won't spend as much time today talking about superintendent roles, but I'm happy to answer questions about those as they come up. So some of the current roles that boards have, like I said, they're independent bodies, and they're separate from cities and county governments. In California, we have over 1,000 school boards, and we have over 6,000 school board members that serve 6.3 million students in California. There's almost 500,000 employees who work in these schools. And so school districts are often the largest employers in their communities, as well as being a place of learning for kids, especially in counties, throughout California, rural counties, suburban counties, but many school districts can be very large institutions and have budgets that run into the hundreds of millions of dollars. So they often, because their budgets are large, can also be a contractor with local businesses. They could be hiring construction firms to be building new school facilities, potentially even housing. School districts are getting in the business of housing more often because of the housing shortage. But sometimes construction can be an area where there can be corruption or bad action that we see in school districts and around boards. So there are school districts have school boards have wide powers, but they aren't allowed to just do whatever they want. They do have to follow state and federal law, and court cases as they become apparent. So boards can't ban topics around curriculum based on political ideology. They have to protect freedom of speech, the right to learn, and the equal access to information. So it's illegal to censor discussions around race, gender, or sexual orientation. This is not a gray area in California state law. It's very clear that curriculum cannot be discriminated based on ideology. School districts have a curriculum adoption process that they follow. It's called the Instructional Quality Commissions process. It first starts with conversations at the state, where there is a publicly appointed board that has conversations about allowable curriculum. And there's different levels that are allowed based on high school versus elementary school, but there is a very, very thorough review process of the curriculum that is adopted at the high school level. And then at the elementary school level, many local school boards do actually have curriculum authority, but they can't be just discriminating based on keyword searches that pull up things that they think might be offensive or inappropriate, and they have to offer the same materials to all students. So that's another requirement under Education Code 606004, which you see here up on the screen. So, they can't just offer one compliant textbook in the library and a different textbook to all the kids in the classrooms. They have to offer the same material to every student, regardless of their identity. Now, there are areas of the curriculum that parents are allowed to opt their child out of, but it's always a opt-out system. And we like to say that privacy is a shield and not a sword. So if parents have individual problems with curriculum or books, it's always a conversation with the teacher and the parent about if that's an appropriate material for them. But and that allowance can be made. It doesn't mean that the entire school needs to that book needs to be removed. So while there is very clear state and federal law that protects against First Amendment discrimination in the selection of curriculum, different parents have different values and they can participate in different processes at the local level if they want to have their voices heard in the curriculum adoption process. Sometimes different curriculums have different rigor or different requirements. A lot of curriculum now has a ed tech component, and so different families may feel differently about how they want the core curriculum taught in their schools, and that's totally appropriate, but it's not appropriate to discriminate based on viewpoint within that curriculum. You can't ban books, although that is something that folks are obviously trying to do quite often right now. Board members do retain their individual rights of free speech, so they can say that they dislike the curriculum or they have a problem with it. As a person, it doesn't maybe match their values or their belief system, but as a public official, they're not allowed to use the resources of the public to impose that viewpoint on everybody else. And that's really the difference. So sometimes it can be hard for people to say, like, this doesn't, maybe match my individual beliefs, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be imposed on everyone else. And the First Amendment is very clear on that. So you're going to hear lots of different buzzwords that potentially are brought up, as Kathy mentioned, by parents' rights advocates. Most of this language is kind of shared as a playbook to make the same point, and folks are often actually driving to and from different meetings to share this viewpoint. But you can hear folks mention critical race theory, try and bring up the fact that this is, different curriculum is being taught in schools. Social emotional learning is also often targeted as something that they'd like to be removed from schools. We know that schools implemented whole child frameworks like the ones that Kathy talked about. I worked on with in my previous work, and those programs often supported students' mental health during the pandemic. We know those programs can be very effective in helping bring kids into school and attend school regularly. And so SEL programs are kind of a new focus. And then, of course, there's a lot of focus on trans bathroom bills, sports issues that many folks are familiar with. And, we often see the same kind of resolutions spreading from school to school district. And all of these have been challenged already in courts because they violate California state law. So some key pieces of education curriculum that we definitely want to highlight for you is the Safe Place to Learn Act, which protects students' rights. It requires that diverse, accurate representation is required in curriculum, that social sciences include history of all groups. That includes migrant farm workers in California. That includes Filipino stories in the Central Valley. That includes stories of Korean immigrants after World War II. There's really diverse stories in California because we're a very diverse state. So we need to have these histories as part of our curriculum in our classrooms so that our kids can all see themselves and understand how to live in a pluralistic, multicultural classroom. I grew up in the 90s when we, talked about how we were going to create that kind of multicultural classroom all the time. So we know how to do it. We can go back to something similar, but something that speaks to what our kids and our families need today. So we have protections for these inclusive materials. The California Healthy Youth Act requires comprehensive sex education that is offered regardless of gender, sexuality, age, and race and ethnicity. And like I said before, sufficient materials are always required under the Williams Act and Ed Code 60119, which means that students have to have equal access to these materials. They can't just be sharing materials that are insufficient for the students to be learning. And they can't block library access. They can't discriminate against protected groups. And if they do, there's serious conversations about risking state funding and legal action. I mean, I think legal action is guaranteed because schools will spend more money on trying to fight these cases. We've already seen school districts spend in the tens of millions of dollars, which schools don't have right now to spend. But we're also seeing talk about the state government finding them, which would be really devastating because it would just remove more resources from already scarce schools. So this is definitely something that we need to interrupt when we see at the local level, because it really could harm students really twice, both psychologically in the impact in their education and by removing resources from their schools. So AB 1955, the Safety Act, has 3 pieces around student privacy, employee protection, and resource development. There's very few staff at the state level. So the CDE is a great place, and I have many colleagues there, with 1,000 school districts and 6,000 school boards and 10,000 schools. It's hard for such a small state agency to try and support materials when so many folks are struggling with conversations right now. And to be honest, I think we need to acknowledge that changing social norms around gender are sometimes difficult for certain parents, and we need to provide more support, more training for parents and schools to be safe places to communicate back and forth and help each other learn. So AB 1955 still has a long way to go, but the coalition behind it is very strong. Many organizations are working to try and improve training for schools, but we need to see and know if schools are banning pride flags, making LGBT staff feel uncomfortable, or bullying or harassing them, which we've seen, and if they are outing students without their consent, which can be very dangerous. So all of these things already fall under existing educational equity laws that California students have, that ensures that they have to have, compliant materials and textbooks, as I've already mentioned. So I want to pause here. I think we're right about on time to see how questions about curriculum, restrictions, LGBT, student safety issues, other things that folks might have questions on this first half.
There are no open questions at the moment.
Okay. I can wait a minute. Good teachers can wait a minute for questions to come.
Someone just asked, some of these are just proposed, right? I do not know if that is referring to
So many school districts are on a variety of spectrum of actions. All of the laws that AB 1955 is already state law. This was passed in 2023. It school districts have passed state school district policy right now. School district policy sits underneath state law unless state law changes. And so 1955 is state law right now, and the Safety Act is what school districts should be following. Are there protections for athletics? So protections for athletics fall under, two different categories of laws. California has California Interscholastic Federation Ed Code, which there are protections based on students' gender identity and sexual orientation in those programs. Title IX protections have the Dear Colleague letter under the Trump administration has changed, but that doesn't negate state law in that case. And of course, there are very, very few number of trans student athletes who are navigating the California Interscholastic Federation's policies, and privacy, like I said before, is a shield, not a sword. We don't get to know minors' health information just because we want to. And so data and reporting on this is difficult, but I, can say that there are protections in place in California CIF policy and state law that currently give transgender students the ability to participate in the gender sport of choice, and they often have their own pathway and policy for access to bathrooms.
Brianna, I'm just wondering if our questioner, Jeannie, was wondering if I'm just wondering if she means, are there protections for female students from transgender students or protections for transgender students?
So oftentimes if any student wanted to request a private bathroom, they could do that. And so that's common in cases where somebody may decide that for, their own gender identity reasons or for somebody else's gender identity reasons that they don't want to change in front of that person. And that is always an allowable exception, or not exception. That's just how these policies work under the California Interscholastic Federation. So I see a couple other questions. I don't know if somebody wants to field them or if I should just answer them as they come in.
I can read them to you, or you can read them, but someone was asking whether federal laws override state laws.
So California education is a complicated area, but it's not in the Constitution, which means that really what the federal government can do is they can take away money, which they are definitely doing at the moment. They are taking away lots of federal money that was put in place during Republican and Democratic administrations beforehand. And so that is one thing the federal government can do. The federal government can not invest resources in enforcing federal law. And then, of course, Congress can change federal law. So, disability laws like IDEA right now still are on the books. But if the federal government defunds enforcement, right, then we see problems with the law and compliance because there's not as high enforcement. So, but when it comes to education, largely education is under the purview of the states because it does not fall into the Constitution. And, what does the Constitution say? Anything not in the Constitution falls to the states. So the states and the governor are really a really big player in your education. But of course, school boards have a huge role to play because the governor can only decide things for a huge state like California at a certain level. And so many decisions are going to be up to local school boards, especially things like budget allocations. And so I see a question about textbook selection, and I think I can clarify here that there is a process at the state level to first vet different options for curriculum adoption to make sure, that science textbooks follow science standards that we call them the next generation science standards. I actually have a poster on my wall right now of all the 35 concepts that we need people to know in order to understand how the world works, like, gravity and physics and chemistry and all of these different principles that make our world work. And so we at the state level make sure that different curriculum fit the framework, which is kind of like a wide set of goals. And then school districts at the local level get to adopt from different curriculums which one they want to choose, because they all have different strengths and weaknesses. And then there's committees at the local level and committees at the statewide level that vet those curriculum. I hope that answers kind of your question, Sina. I know you know quite a bit about that as well. The CDE, apologies, is the California Department of Education, and they are basically the statewide organization that oversees and will play a very large role moving forward as well in civil rights monitoring, program and grant monitoring, and making sure that school districts follow the law. And I see a question from Lorinda. The Ethnic Studies program is being contested in our area. What is the status of the state mandated but yet unfunded course requirement? So the state has mandated that school districts adopt an Ethnic Studies program before a high school Ethnic Studies graduation requirement before 2030. And so school districts are creating the program to start often this year or next year, and they're adopting curriculum. And that kind of goes into what I said about the state creating a framework. The state created an ethnic studies framework. They created 2 different ethnic studies frameworks, actually. They didn't like the first one, so they went back and did it again. And now there's different options for materials. A couple of the material curriculums are being challenged in court for different bias checks, right? This is one of the checks and balances we have, is to see, hey, can this judge tell me if this curriculum is violating some of our principles, some of our non-discrimination ideas that we put in state law. And so an unfunded mandate is something that the state requires but does not give school districts the money for. And it's a little bit of it's a shorthand statement for saying that, you know, it's a little sometimes hard to say what is and isn't an unfunded mandate. An unfunded mandate just means the state required a school to give something without tying it to specific dollars. So that's kind of the difference there. When discussing the budget, does that include K through 12 only, or what is usually done in California with funding including community college? So community colleges are funded in this under Prop 98 with California, with K through 12 schools, and they are run by community college boards that are run very similarly to K through 12 boards. So if you vote for your local community college or your local school board, you can look on your ballot, and usually there's also a community college board that is funded and operates in a very similar way.
So Brianna, you did a great job of explaining curriculum selection at each of the different organizational levels, but Cassie had a question specifically about how parents can participate in that process.
That's a great question. And there's 2 different levels in which you can participate. You can participate, yes, of course, as a parent, you can participate, but you can also participate as an alumni, as a grandma, as an auntie. You can get involved at your school site level by joining a school site council. And often there's like maybe sometimes meetings in which they're reviewing or working with your local librarian to decide things, fundraise for the libraries, which is usually oftentimes what needs to be done. At the district level, there is an instructional quality adoption committee. School board members often participate in that. There are rules, there are timelines, there are hearings, there are committees, there is law, because we have a process for everything in education. And so the curriculum adoption process, and sometimes you're focusing on ethnic studies curriculum, and sometimes you're focusing on English learner, multilingual learner curriculum, or maybe you're looking at financial literacy curriculum. There's a lot of new programs that students, and curriculum's changing all the time because what we need to teach our kids is changing all the time, right? We kind of want our curriculum to get updated quickly. We know a lot more science today. I still remember being in middle school when Pluto went away and we had to update all the textbooks, right? So we have to do these kinds of things fairly often, and there's always a committee at the local level. So I would go to your school board meeting and see when the next time their instructional quality commission, it's usually called IQC. I kind of think about it as like QVC. It's almost like if you're in shopping for books instead of shopping for something else. So I think that's a great way to get involved in your local schools.
Do parents have veto power?
Nobody has veto power because it's a democratic process, right? So everybody gets to participate and everybody's voice is heard. So if folks do have concerns about their curriculum, they can go to those meetings and they can share those concerns. And it's not meant to silence anybody's voice. It's meant to open the process so that multiple people can participate. And that's why we need you all to participate so that all of our diverse values and viewpoints are held and state law is upheld, right? And we know that state law says we can't have viewpoint discrimination. Great. Well, I think from here, I will move into the second half of our presentation, which goes into a little bit more about what do you actually do, or how can we actually make sure that we're seeing these things follow the law, that our schools are, all of us are getting to participate, and we're making sure that if there is discriminatory behavior happening, that we're monitoring it and taking action on it. So school boards have rules, just like a lot of boards do. If you participate in a nonprofit board or a corporate board, they often have to have a minimum number of people for their votes to count. They individually do not have any power. They only have power as a group. They, since the pandemic, have been allowed to take remote voting, and that means that they have to post and make themselves available wherever they are publicly. But oftentimes we do see that school boards must post their meetings 72 hours in advance. That's usually 3 business days. A very good board, if they were having a Tuesday afternoon meeting, would have their agenda posted Friday afternoon. That would be the appropriate timeline for 3 full 72-hour business days. And there are often emergency actions that are coming up 24 hours inappropriately and misusing, a law that would really be about if there was an earthquake, a fire, a pandemic, things that, you really need to handle, maybe an emergency with a student or a family member on campus. So we want to make sure that the process that school boards are following the process that's laid out for them in law and in their board bylaws, which are found in the 9,000s of the board policy manual. And those board policies, they're going to be called like 90, 90-10, 90-20, 90-20, 20-3. These board policies are the bylaws that govern the school districts, the school board's behavior, and they write them for themselves, so they can change them, but they do have to make sure they can't change them willy-nilly. They have to follow the existing Gov code and Ed code that exists in them. And so there are different things that you can do to make sure that school districts are following these important process points, because it really makes sure they're not just trying to do something under the cover of darkness with nobody paying attention, right? Process points help us get people in the room, help bring transparency. And I like to say that transparency, sunshine is the best disinfectant, right? The more transparency, the more eyes we have watching, the more likely it is that we can make sure the right thing is happening. So we need you to show up, to take notes, to document, to look at the agenda, and to speak up when you see something. And if needed, escalate through formal complaints. And so we'll go over that in a little bit, what that looks like. Boards do have something before their meetings called closed session. Closed session requires that they agendize what they're going to cover and talk about in closed session, and they have to report out afterwards if they took any action or any summary of what's happening. Closed session should only be used for when they're discussing either hiring, firing, an employee labor relation issue, a settlement negotiation. They will often discuss maybe the collective bargaining agreement, or if they're selling property or a lawsuit in closed session. But we see right now that boards who are using the courts to try and sue their way up to the Supreme Court, like we said, Kathy said, they're misusing closed session by basically using it to talk about and plan really whatever they want, and not share it with the public. And so I think think that we, really need to keep close eye on how boards are agendizing and using closed session, the topics that they're discussing. They should still be sharing out if they're taking action. If they have to recuse themselves for a conflict of interest, they're still supposed to report that out. And there is still a public comment period for closed session. So even though you may not know, the details of what's happening in closed session, you still are allowed to comment on it and make sure that your voice is heard, asking questions, holding school boards accountable. And you are allowed to criticize the district if you think that they've made a hiring decision that they should not. We sometimes see that school boards are using public funds inappropriately and hiring folks that they shouldn't be. And so it's important to use that closed session public comment period to point that out. And if they don't follow these rules, they use closed session or agendize an item inappropriately, that item and that vote can be challenged in court and overturned. And they can potentially re-agendize it and reapprove it, but you can stop it from taking effect in the meantime. So personnel matters, labor negotiation, pending litigation, like I said, still has to be on the agenda. Public comment still has to be allowed, and documents can be available upon request. Sometimes you do have to file a Public Records Act to get access to some of these things, or Freedom of Information Act, as some people know it as. But it doesn't allow them to just do and keep whatever they want from you. So there's different actions that can be taken. First, we think it's just really important to observe. It can be really scary sometimes to show up for your first school board meeting, just sitting in the back and listening and finding out what's happening, what kind of items are being agendized, and how your public money is being spent. We often like to encourage people to look at the most recent school district board budget, and we're talking voters who maybe 2,000 or 3,000 voters voted in the last election, and the budget for the school board is $165 million a year. So that's sometimes close to $500 million of local public tax dollars that should be spent with with lots of community members paying attention to how it's being used. So we recommend that you document everything, that you take the agenda and record of who's voting, the meeting notes that are available. These should be all available online, but we want to make sure that we have copies of them. Review upcoming agendas, take a look on your district website. You should find either like a board docs, a Gamut, or a Simply site, a Granicus site that has these agendas, and find out when the next time they're going to take action on. And then there is also a complaint form called the Uniform Complaint and process. And this is a way of actually filing and stating that you think that something has discriminated against a student. And it just needs to apply to one student to matter. We talked about this, regular meetings. The website has to be posted and accessible to all. And it does need to it requires a description of each item. So these meetings are often even more accessible since COVID happened. So I would encourage you, even if you have a busy schedule, you can often listen in on a board meeting or listen to it after the fact, but it's always more impactful to go there in person and share public comment. It helps people realize that they're being watched. Excuse me, I need more coffee today. And we know that folks are often communicating off boards, and these can occasionally rise to the level of actually violating state law. Some gatherings don't count as board meetings, like conferences or community events. Your local band concert is not a violation of this, but if all of your board members are going to the same conferences and meeting and talking about the same items, anything that could be on the agenda in the future, that is potentially a violation that should be monitored, just because we see once again people misusing conference spaces to plan things outside of the public eye. So there's many different places to find agendas so that you can see what your local school board is agendizing and paying attention to. You can make a standing request that all of the agendas are actually delivered to your front door. There's a little piece of gov code there that if you want a paper copy of your agendas, they can mail them to you. Local community members occasionally can even add an agenda item to their local school board meeting under Board Bylaw 9322. And so if you have that in your bylaw, I would take advantage of it, ask to meet with your school board member, see if you can propose something locally that you care about or your chapter cares about so that you can talk about it. Effective monitoring doesn't really require you to know everything, but just take a look for action red flags that we've talked about. So are they changing agenda items beyond what the scope said on the agenda? Are they hiding different topics and sneaking actions or contracts into different proposals that seem not related? And are they ignoring procedures or adding topics to agendas that really have nothing seemingly to do with what the bread and butter issues of teaching and learning for our kids every day look like. So every member has the right to speak, and boards cannot require that you give your name in order to speak. So you can speak anonymously if you would like to. But of course, remember, everything is recorded these days and posted on the internet. Stick to the issue. Try and avoid personal attacks. And if they try and silence you, document it. Come with a friend so that somebody can make sure that you're not alone and you're being monitored when you're trying to corroborate different stories afterwards. So online participation is great if that's what's available to you. If you can go in person, that's even better. Taking notes and recording are totally allowed because it's a public space and a public meeting. And so this is one of the areas where government is supposed to function, is at our local school boards. And I think we can help it function better when we show up and show what it's supposed to look like to act and participate in government civilly. Your public comment, you have to be granted access to speak at every meeting and ideally before every public comment agenda item. That's actually what is required. Many school districts don't necessarily follow that. They can often give you 3 minutes, which is the standard speaker time, and they can restrict it, but it has to be within a reasonable restriction. And so many courts have filed to try and figure out what that length is. You don't need a law degree to monitor a school board. You can just bring a friend and be present. And I think these small actions can help us build accountability over time. I said, yeah. Prevent arguments and one-sided exchanges. School board members actually can't respond to you directly and shouldn't respond to you directly when you give public comment. It can be frustrating, but it's really meant to try and reduce the idea that one single board member has the power to do something, which is really, we want the board to act in the best interest of all the students. And your public comment helps them understand the narrative of what's important to their community and their constituents. If you try and do all of these things and go to a meeting and speak up and you're still seeing that you think that there's discriminatory behavior, we encourage you to file a uniform complaint procedure, which you can do anonymously. There is a reporting deadline for 3 days for the district to respond from the County Office of Education. And like I said before, it applies to even just one student. So if one student had a discriminatory classroom lesson experience, the incident can be investigated by the district and also by the county. And recent state laws changes allows you to go straight to the state as well. But I think that these things often we have to show our local community our values, and it's really important for the local governance system to handle them if they can. If you feel like they can't, then you can appeal up higher. So usually there's a remedy found in those UCP complaints where either the material needs to be fixed or the lesson needs to be fixed or the employee needs to have professional learning or training, or there needs to be a student service offered. So it's an administrative process to help remedy something that we know is not following state law. There are amazing complaint resources that we want to make you available of, that the Public School Defenders Hub worked to help create, called the Education Complaint Guide. This was made by ACLU Southern California, and it shows templates for different ways to effectively file complaints under the Uniform Complaint Procedure. And so it includes much of what we've already encouraged you to do, to write down what happened, to gather evidence, to identify the violation. That's why we've included some of the ed code for you here. And to identify the right agency. So often it can be your local school district, like we said, or your local county office of education, and the California Department of Education can be involved in adjudicating the complaint. You need to submit your complaint, and there is appeal processes if the complaint is not resolved to your satisfaction. So there's help out there for you if you want to, if you see examples of violations, like the ones we have on the screen around inclusive curriculum, and making sure that people see themselves in all of the curriculum that is in schools, not just history, social science, but in sex education. And there is discrimination and harassment issues that are also protected under the Uniform Complaint Procedure. So this is kind of a catch-all administrative process. So students or families or a community member that has an issue can file these. And you have to have a student in the school, I should say, who's experiencing this issue. But if you see it happening, schools if you see it happening at the school board level, that means it's affecting all the school students. And some of these are currently being challenged in different courts, but like we said, are standing law in California, and education falls largely under the state constitution. So California will continue to be the jurisdictional decider in most of these pieces of state law. So we know there was a lot that we covered tonight, but really at the end of the day, we want to just reinforce the fact that if you can, pay attention to what's happening on your local agendas and your local school boards, that's where you can make the biggest difference. It's really hard and frustrating, of course, what's happening at the federal level, but we actually have the power to change what's happening in our local school districts by showing up, attending meetings, speaking up, requesting materials, using complaint forms, using our contacts, learning our local policies, because as soon as we start to become silent, then we accept what the things are happening to us. So we're really excited that AAUW is stepping up, and all of their members we know is stepping up. Happy to stop here and answer questions before we offer our closing.
So Nancy mentions that most closed sessions end up with a no report out comments, which she finds frustrating, and usually nothing more than a general description of pending litigation or hiring or firing.
Yeah. I mean, it is hard without knowing exactly what's going on in closed session, what's happening there. I would encourage you to sit down with a board member if you find that there's one that you could have a relationship with, buy them a cup of coffee. The job is actually usually pretty hard and uncelebrated and unsupported, and ask them, express frustration that there's not more transparency, ask for more clarity on different items. Because I think a lot of times what we have to understand is that it's the appearance of good governance that matters, as well, not just if people are suspicious, and it's very reasonable right now to maybe be curious about what our local government is doing because of everything that's happening, then good local leaders should be willing to go above and beyond to build that trust and transparency and respect. As far as if you see that there's a pattern of closed session being used inappropriately, I would take careful note, like we said, and contact your local chapter lead or however Kathy recommends, because we do know that there are cases where it's part of a larger, maybe bad practices in governance that we want to paint a picture around.
And Nancy asks, should we only attend our own local school board meetings or look to other parts of the state?
And I'm going to handle that one if that's okay with you. I think this is an AUW related question. If you can attend any school board, any district meeting that you want, but if you're attending on behalf of AUW, the answer would be yes, we encourage you to attend meetings wherever you're able. We have a lot of, particularly our rural districts where we're actually having the most problems that need the most observing and monitoring. A lot of those we don't have branches in. So we will be calling on some of you who are close to, in proximity to some of those districts. We may be asking you if you would, and some of your fellow members would be willing to attend some of those meetings to monitor those districts. So yeah, you don't have to be in that district in order to attend and have a say.
Yeah, I love that answer. I think that it's really important. I mean, I think too often folks think, and really it's about sharing the message that kids are all our responsibility. I have nieces and nephews in the Roseville City School District, which is struggling with a lot of these issues. And, we can speak up for kids in all of our different communities as we're able. And like we said, you don't have to give your name. I know a lot of folks do want to give their name and a location, like who they're coming and representing when they're giving public comment, but it's not required. And so, effective public comment also speaks to, you and your relationship to the school and why you care. So I'm sure all of the AUW women I've ever met are incredibly effective public speakers and very good at sharing their story and their values. So I'm sure your members will do a great job.
If you take a look at the sample scripts that we provided as part of our toolkit on our website, it'll say if you are actually in that district, it will the intro will be something to that effect, because it is important. If you are in district, it's important to let them know. They're going to pay more attention to you, I think, as an individual if you let them know that you're in that district, or you have grandchildren who are going to school in that district. Those kind of things are important. If you're out of district, though, it's perfectly fine to say, I'm here on behalf of AUW California, because we represent the entire, all of the residents of the state of California. So that would be the difference, is how you do your intro, depending if you're in district or out of district.
And Nancy asked if there's a list of topics that we should watch on school board agendas. And I would say that, there are ones that we're seeing as very common. We're seeing that school boards are often agendizing, trans student outing bills, bathroom bills, social emotional learning bans, DEI bans, community school bans. I mean, oftentimes the resolution and the specifics in the policy or the agenda is less pertinent than just the tone and kind of overall want to try and create division in the community, and agendize something that really maybe doesn't have a material always effect on schools and students. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it's banning pride flags from classrooms or banning all flags from classrooms. And all of these things are meant to just try and make certain students feel not welcome and not belonging in school campus. And we're hearing and seeing that students, many of them want to go back to remote instruction. They want to go back on Zoom. They don't feel safe at schools, which is the exact opposite that we want, because we know kids learn better when they're at school. So, taking a look for some of these agendas, I find you can almost kind of tell because they don't quite fit in the agenda. Like if you scale through the agenda, sometimes they just kind of don't pass the smell test of being kind of like, you kind of turn your head and wonder why. And I think that you can often see that it's not genuinely maybe coming from the community, but being shared maybe from outside forces. So it's always good to take a look and ask with honest, curiosity, why are we talking about this today, right? Is this something that students and parents and families have really brought up, or is this something that is coming from outside of our community? Because I think all of us really want our local schools to serve the needs of our kids and families locally. I think that's actually actually a very shared value around. And we also have to have a floor for civil rights for students to be able to come to school and feel safe to do so.
And Nancy, I think you're going to find in response to that last comment that a lot of the things that end up on the agenda that we're concerned with get placed there at the request of some of these parents' rights groups that are coming in. And that's how you're going to find out about it. But I also want to let you know that the committee is in the process of developing a new checklist. We have a checklist on our website currently, but that pertains to phase 1. And so we're in the process of developing a new checklist for this phase 3, where we're specifically zeroing in on existing California laws. So that checklist will have all of the things that we want you to be watching for, that we're hoping that you will be watching for and reporting back to us. So we'll be letting all of the public policy chair liaisons know when that checklist is available and on our website, and then they can all get the information out to their members.
Sounds good.
Any other questions?
I see Casey's comment about women. Women are included in the protected categories for curriculum. Apologies, but if it was not on the slides, but it is listed in the ed code. And of course, it's really often about a diverse curriculum from multiple viewpoints, and schools and classrooms have different moments in which they're going to prioritize and, look at women's curriculum, women of color's curriculum, BIPOC curriculum. So those are really coming at, like I said, the local level. And the best way to make sure that there's curriculum that really centers women's stories and women's history is to get involved in that local level and make sure that that's a part of the perspective that kids are being taught and shared.
And I'm going to take Ellen's next question about our school board meetings are really tense. I was actually in my closing comments, I was going to talk about this, but I'll just take the opportunity to address it here. And this has to do with should we, and Brianna touched on it briefly, should we attend, and is it better to attend in person or remotely? And through the feedback that we've been getting from our members who have been attending over the last couple of years, we're very much aware of the intensity of these meetings, and we don't want our members to feel intimidated. We don't want you to feel in any way that you don't want to participate in this project because you're feeling intimidated. So remote meetings are perfectly fine. In fact, in some instances, depending on the district that you're in, they might actually be better. The difference is this: the benefit of going in person is generally what we're finding is that members are going as a group, more than 2. Some of them, we have one district where there's about 10 of them who are regularly attending together. They even had T-shirts made. And you're going, if you can go as an individual, but if you're going to represent AEW, that's great to let that be known. And we hope that you will. And so having that presence there can be really important. It can be good for the organization, of course. It can be good because it can invite other like-minded people who are there from other like-minded organizations to know that you're there and feel comfortable in approaching you to collaborate, to find ways to work together and to support each other. So that's really important. But it's also critical because the parents' rights groups, Moms for Liberty, for instance, is the most prominent one that we're finding. They come in mass, they come in numbers. And as Brianna said, they go from district to district to district, and they usually are there they don't have a stake in that particular district. But it's important for the school board members, we feel, to know that they're not the only ones who appear in groups. They're not the only ones who have group support and group strength. So they're able to see if we go in person and where they're representing in a group, then they can see that the other side cares just as much about these issues. So those are the distinctions between in person and remote. Everybody has to make their own decision. And definitely, again, we don't want you to feel intimidated, but we do want you to participate. So if you'd be more comfortable doing it by video, then by all means, choose that route. That's fine.
And if you have the possibility, building a relationship and having a conversation with a school board member is even better than going, and giving public comment. And we know not everybody is able to, but I have always, been impressed and been inspired by the really the ways that AEW women can make their point, you know, heard. And I think we can often talk to people who we disagree with, you know, across the aisle and talk about the shared values that we want. And many school board members, not all of them are willing to listen to everything that Moms for Liberty is sharing. They just need to hear a different perspective. And if moms, you know, to Kathy's point, if Moms for Liberty is the only perspective that they're hearing, if moms, you know, parents' rights groups are the only people that are showing up to these meetings, then they think that that must be what all people feel. And so, you know, if you can, showing up and or, you know, writing in an email, giving them a perspective and following up to see if, you know, if they read it, if they heard about it, you know, did they change their mind? Because I think we can often, you know, write people off too soon, and many school board members are sensing that these are coming, like Kathy said, from outside groups. So we can have conversations that hopefully change their minds.
Got it for questions? So Ellen, that's great. And sending written comments is fine. Again, those are all acceptable methods of interacting with the board. And thank you. We're glad you're doing that.
And there's a lot of school board business that is really important that sometimes isn't controversial that people skip over because, you know, we're focusing on the negative. So it can be really powerful to share the good things that you see happening in your school district, you know, the stories of teachers, you know, stepping up and doing something great for a kid, or a school librarian and, you know, the benefit that they brought you or your kids or your grandkids. You know, oftentimes we're all, you know, many people involved in the education system are there for all the right reasons, and we have a huge shortage of staff and teachers and support staff and school bus drivers and principals and everybody involved. So going there and helping shift the narrative back from just all of this bad controversial stuff towards the real business of what schools do every day, which is providing great, safe, healthy places for kids to learn and grow. You know, we know that people know that if we can remind them that that's really what they're there for.
Oh, we have a couple more.
Cassie's just mentioning that because you provide this training to other groups and don't mention women, your trainees may not be on the lookout for exclusion of women. So just a comment in that respect. I think that's the end of the questions.
Thanks, Cassie. And thanks, Don. I want to at this time mention that when you completed the survey, you had an opportunity to enter questions at that time. I hope that a lot of your questions have been answered by this training, but if they have not, I just wanted to let you know, Brianna has put together, and she and I together have worked on an FAQ that answers all of those questions, and that you can find that on our website. That will be posted, and it's on that same page that was put into the chat, the link that was put into the chat, linking you to the school board project webpage. So if you just go to that link on that, it'll tell you everything you need to know about the project up to this point. And again, we're in the process of now that we're going into phase 3, we're in the process of providing some additional resources that pertain specifically to this phase. But within the body of that page, at 2 different places, you'll find places where it says, find your school board project liaison here. And if you click on that here, it will take you to a document that has it doesn't have the branches, but it has all of the districts throughout California. And there are 5 of us on the school board project committee, and each of us have been assigned a certain number of those districts. So when you go to that page, you just find the area where you're in. For instance, if you're in Santa Barbara County or Ventura County or Orange County, the county or the district will show up if your branch is within that listed district, then that's your liaison. It has her name as well as her email address. So any questions that come up, any issues, problems, comments, anything that you are observing, want us to know about, are concerned about, please make sure you share that information with your assigned liaison, and they will share it with, with the rest of the committee. We'll do everything that we can as a committee to resolve, help you resolve the issue for your district, or just, you know, we're also in the business of compiling data. So we want to hear from everybody what's going on. You guys, again, are our eyes and ears out there in the field. And we really rely on you to bring that information back to us so that we can keep on top of this and know what's going on in the different districts throughout the state. We also have a lot of resources on that page, and most of the hub resources that are pertinent to our project will be, we'll have links to those as well. And if you do find violations and that you feel rise to the level of a complaint, of filing a complaint, we would ask you to go ahead and complete the complaint form and then send that as an attachment to your liaison, so we can review it and we can compare it and see if there are other, we're getting like, you know, similar comments with somewhere within your district, and make a joint decision on how we want to resolve that. After today, you'll find the FAQs online, a checklist online, the complaint process, and the list of the current list of your liaisons. So I think if there aren't any other questions, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. And I hope you will join me in thanking a warm round of applause for Brianna Mullen for the great job that she did in presenting all of this to it. Brianna, you've made it so much more understandable to our members about what the laws are in California, and how to be a good observer and a good monitor and a good reporter. What we all want to do is those magic words, transparency and accountability, right? So by you being there, you make the board be transparent, and by filing complaints when they're violating what they're supposed to be doing, we're holding them accountable. So it takes all of us. We're so proud of all of our members who are have shown interest in this project and who are supporting us in this project, and go forth and do good. And a big shout out, I couldn't let this go without a big shout out to our web team. Thank you so much to the web team for all your always ongoing support and helping us put together and present this to our membership. We appreciate it very much. Brianna, did you have any final words you'd like to say?
Just thank you guys so much. I'm so grateful for AUW stepping up and the membership always, you know, being leaders in the local communities and showing what it looks like for women leaders to really show our values. So thank you, Kathy, for the opportunity, and always here for any AUW member. Thanks
so much, Brianna. And Brianna, if you'll stay on, I think we forgot to mention this before, but you'll just stay on for a few minutes for a wind down with the team. Night, everybody.